Well, hello and welcome into another episode of the Beyond the Youth Room podcast. My name is Ryan and this is Keith. And today we're going to be tackling a crucial topic for any youth pastor or youth leader, and that is how to find and properly value a mentor in youth ministry. So stay tuned for today's episode. He said only 19% of pastors receive a personal, spiritual support from a group of peers or mentors more than once a month. So finances, only 26% under 45 of pastors in America thought they were flourishing. Relationships, that number drops down to 16%. And well-being, that number drops to 7%.
And he ended up dying by 30 because he just wore himself out. He said, the Lord gave me a message and a horse to send me, to tell people about the message, and I killed the horse.
The reason why most people fail in their ministry is because their success in ministry outpaces their success in other areas of their life.
Yeah. So she had asked her, she's like, hey, can you disciple me? Can you mentor me? And she's like, what are you talking about? I've been doing this.
A red flag would be your ministry life is getting out of balance with your personal life. And don't expect your pastor to be your mentor because they don't always see it that way. And so tomorrow morning I open up the newspaper and your mugshot's on the front. What's the title? And I was like, now, Keith, we'll have interesting viewpoints on this because you have kind of been mentoring me. And
just say it. I'm much older than you.
No, that's not even what I'm saying. I've been very appreciative for how you've mentored me. And even our kind of friendship has kind of changed throughout different things. So at first it was kind of, through Cutting Edge Ministries, you hosting, a gathering for local youth pastors and youth leaders and investing in them. And that's kind of how we got started. But then I got so much value from that I even went to you and I was like, hey, or actually we did an 8-week course with just a couple of guys specifically. And so we did that. And then even from there, I was like, I still have so much to learn. And you and I even did a once a month, kind of coaching thing that was kind of more formal and established. And now we've kind of evolved out of that. But
you text me memes in the middle of the night.
Yes. Well, you do more of that than I do. But
I know. I'm sometimes I'm wondering, is it too late to text Ryan? No, he's not a student or anything.
No.
So
but and now it's even I like keeping you on retainer because even we have a working friendship and even just a general friendship. But it still is nice to kind of be hey, can I officially have some of your time to talk through some things?
Yeah.
And so I have benefited, and just so I can't even begin to speak on how much I've benefited from having a mentor and just all I've learned from you and what that's been like. But interestingly enough, the majority of youth pastors or even just pastors in America do not have a mentor. And so this was actually, I believe this research was done by Barna, but it was in a video that Carey Nieuwhof did. He said only 19% of pastors receive a personal, spiritual support from a group of peers or mentors more than once a month. And so this isn't even necessarily talking about just a professional mentor.
Yeah.
This is even just talking about somebody personally who is spiritually looking out for that pastor, only 19%. And that is down 16%. So that number was 37% in 2015. And so that is a trend that they've been tracking where there seems to be a disconnected.
So basically 1 in 5. That's 1 in 5.
Yeah. And there seems to be a disconnectedness between peers and youth pastors, which we definitely have some thoughts on that because we see some of this and we can talk more about that. But the other statistic they shared and Barna shared was they asked youth pastors over 45 and under 45 how likely they are than their colleagues to be flourishing. So they asked them, they said, hey, based on what you know about your colleagues, how do you feel like you're doing better than them? How likely do you feel you're flourishing? And they found a huge gap between those under 45 and over 45. So of those under 45, which I would say most or the majority of youth pastors or youth leaders, not all. And I mean, God bless you if you're still in youth ministry because, I never want to leave youth ministry. I love what we get to do. So I hope to be you one day. But under 45, only 61% said they thought they were flourishing in their faith. And then when it went to vocation, so their actual working ministry, that number dropped to 35% felt they were flourishing. Then it went to finances, only 26% under 45 of pastors in America thought they were flourishing. Relationships, that number drops down to 16%. And well-being, that number drops to 7%. And so we see that there is a huge gap where, especially in personal lives, pastors seem to be really struggling, and there's a lot of reasons for
that's
that.
what's heartbreaking. It's just, I mean, general well-being.
Yes.
Like 7%.
Feel that they're flourishing more so than their peers. Wow. And so to me, it speaks to this. We can probably should break this into two parts. Like a vocational mentor where you and I talk like, okay, youth ministry wise, I have this issue. What should I do? Yeah. But also just a personal mentor. And that could be the same person. That could be different people. I mean, there's wisdom in a multitude of counsel. So like having multiple elders as well. And I've had people personally speaking in. But when it comes to this idea of mentor, I guess the big thing is like, if you don't have one, you need one. I mean, this is obviously found in scripture where, Paul is mentoring Timothy and getting to, absolutely. And getting to read that and see that. And so, but the stark contrast is that the majority of pastors do not have a mentor. And so our hope today is to kind of step into that and maybe kind of address this issue in the heart of it.
Yep. Well, it goes back to like the way that I kind of see this is I remember many years ago, and I don't even know if they do this anymore. I haven't seen it in a while on a flight, but I was on a flight and they had headphone jacks in the seat. And you can switch between channels. Did you ever experience this? Have you ever been on a flight that has this? I don't even know if they do that anymore. It was like on the older planes. I don't know. But anyways, you can listen to like they had like different music playing, whatever. I guess everybody has their own devices. It's kind of a new point. But you could plug the headphones into the little thing in your armrest, whatever, and you can change channels. And I'm like almost certain they don't do this channel anymore. But they actually had. You can listen to like radio correspondence like of the flight, like from the pilot and down to the ground and stuff. And at least that's what I think it was. Like I don't know, maybe I wasn't.
They were just playing it on a loop. It's the same thing every single time.
But what was fascinating was I remember I found this channel, whatever, and I was listening to it, and as we were taking off, there was some pilots that had reported that they had already taken off like it was like 45 minutes before us, whatever, and to where they got. To further along, whatever, they had hit some turbulence and some weather or whatever that caused turbulence. So they were basically radioing back. I don't know if it was radioing to the ground and then back up to. I don't know if they were directly communicating with other pilots, but they had communicated, hey, this many minutes out, whatever, towards this direction, we've hit some rough patches in weather, and it's going to cause some more turbulence. And probably they have all the technology now where they can tell that without someone reporting. But this was an ideal of mentorship where it was like, hey, we've already gone through this, and now we're just telling you what you're about to experience. Yeah. And I thought that was like such a clear picture of like just the value of having someone that's not necessarily, they don't have to be older than you, but like to be more experienced than you in a certain area where you would respect them in the sense that like they could communicate what they've been through and how to help you navigate some of the same things. And so that might be different life stages. It might be, different ministry experiences. Maybe it's longevity in a certain area of ministry that they can mentor. But that's the idea, is that choosing someone that's been there like before you, and they're just helping you navigate through what's to come. And I think that's a clear picture of the benefit of having a mentor. But then of course you mentioned there's definitely certain things that you can have mentors specialize in, as far as like whether it's your personal relationships, like with your family, or it could be someone that can help you in ministry specifically. And so but I think this kind of came up recently. We had some friends, really close friends of ours, that we've always kept in contact, even though they moved away, and they were just back in town recently, and we had dinner with them, just Caroline and I. And there's a couple that we're really close to, and they were asking us, hey, like who is investing in you now? And the different seasons in ministry has been different people, and it was like the first time someone had asked us that in a while, where I was like, I need to there's people that we can go to at any point, but it's like, who is active? And I'm like, so this kind of came up recently in my own life. I'm like, man, I need to be more intentional about this as well. So I'm wondering, as I was hearing some of these stats, I'm wondering, yes, I've received personal spiritual support from groups, I do receive that. So I guess I wouldn't be in this stat specifically, but to have a distinctive mentor that's actually investing in me or leading me through a season or a process, I don't have that currently, where I'm meeting with them regularly or whatever. So people I can go to with questions anytime. And one of the benefits that we had early on, I learned this from someone it was actually another one of our mentors that had said like, hey, when you're developing, just like wise counsel, like if you're trying to make a decision, like who do you call when you want to make a big decision and you want their input, or you need some help and guidance and thinking through a perspective, and to have like a almost like an advisory board in different areas.
Yeah.
So this is like, I remember counseling with so many different of my adult leaders where they made really poor financial decisions, and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, what led you to make that decision? And they're like, well, that's what my dad told me to do. And I'm like, well, how's your dad like when it comes to financial? He's like, oh yeah, well, he's been bankrupt 3 times and he's doesn't have any plan for it. I'm like, did you ever think of like, ask questions from people that you look up to, or like what, like where they're going is like, or where they are is where you want to go. Like, and so sometimes the same person might have, a specialty, or like a, where you can, put them on your informal advisory board where if you have a financial question, you're going to go to this person. If you have a ministry related question, you're going to go to this person. If you have a family related question, you're going to, and sometimes they overlap where the same person is like just awesome in multiple areas, whatever. Yeah. But that's what helps me to kind of think through of like, okay, who can I pursue? And then also when it comes to, approaching those people, like, it doesn't always. I remember we had, when I first joined staff at McLean, it was almost like 2 generations. So we had like an older staff, like we had 3 staff that were older and that had like, one of them, I think at the time she had a teenager, or maybe she was like college age daughter. The other 2 that were kind of investing in us had kids, and we were just like freshly married, or like some of us were not even married yet or whatever. So it was almost like 2 different generations. We both served in student ministry, but they were kind of like our parent, like we call them like, our student ministry parents. Yeah. And so I remember one of the girls that was on staff with us, she was trying to, be mentored by this older lady that was on staff that had just had so much wisdom and experience. And so she had asked her, she's like, hey, can you like disciple me? Like, can you mentor me? And she's like, what are you talking about? I've been doing this. Like, and so she had in this mind of like, what did that look like? As far as like, oh, we had to meet every week. And she's like, no, I've been like, all these different times where you've asked me questions. She's like, I've been intentionally praying for you. And so sometimes there's got to be like that, defining the relationship as far as like, hey, will you meet with me? So, and define what that looks like based on time and schedule and all that stuff. But just to identify those people and then help them, ask them, hey, are you interested in investing in me for the season, or helping with me this certain issue, or keeping me accountable to this? And so we have some people that may be listening that are from rural towns, or small churches, or both, or a small church in a rural town. And it's not like they have tons of people to choose from when it comes to approaching them to be a mentor, or to to help them in a different season. What would your advice be to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of bad things about the internet. There's also a lot of good things about the internet, and being able to use online platforms. We have some bias, but like, Youth Ministry Mastermind, what we've created, I'm always astounded every time I look at the poll of how long you've been in ministry, how veteran the people in the online platform that we have are. And so again, if you haven't joined that, check out the description below. But regardless of what it is, like, there's so many different ways that you can find, just people who've walked the path that you've walked before online. And, we're both a part of like some youth pastors Facebook groups and things like that. And sometimes people ask questions in there and you're like, oh man, but you do.
And even some of the responses, I'm like,
but you do see people in there who are even just taking time generously out of their hearts to like give a thoughtful answer. And like, so even just things like that, you notice some things like that. I mean, I've had great conversations with people who I've just seen, and then I just like friended them on, Facebook. I sound so old saying that, like I friended them on Facebook, but, and then like had a conversation based out of that too. And so there's, some people have like one person that they go to and they're like, this is my mentor. And some people, they might have like, even in ministry, I might ask different people and get different opinions. But yeah, I would say leverage online platforms, like, especially if you are, a lot of youth pastors are probably going like, I wish my senior leadership would mentor me. And the fact of life is, and you've stepped out of youth ministry for a time and purpose, is like, you are so busy that sometimes it's hard to justify in your own mind to say, I'm going to take time from doing the actual tasks to now mentoring and investing. And so I think one of the biggest things is, this might sound harsh, but I mean it in a loving way. Is like, don't expect your pastor to be your mentor because they don't always see it that way. And like in a perfect world, we all would say we would love that. But
And it's a very interesting, it's a unique relationship that I would say like I would say, so Todd, my boss, like at the church, like he's our pastor, like he invests in us. And, but as far as like, I think there is wisdom in having like a multitude of different people that might invest in you, and even outside of your own context.
And that's kind of my point is like, I think a lot of people just look at their senior leadership and say, why don't they do it? Like they should be doing it. Mm-hmm. It's not that they're not your pastor. It's not that they shouldn't be caring about your soul. They should be doing those things. Yeah. But in terms of, meeting with you on a very often, like frequently basis to be doing these things. I found sometimes it's like, it was so freeing to have somebody outside of our church context because it saw things differently. You were able to say like, hey, like, well, tell me more about this and why'd you guys do it this way? And that kind of helped. But also too, and we've all been there, it's like when you're frustrated, if you pick up and call who you're going to call your boss and be like, I can't believe that we did this. It's like, that sometimes those conversations are like, you're both frustrated and now what do you do? Yeah. And so having somebody outside of that ministry context is so important. And I even think we have to be so careful because us as youth leaders, it can be easy to fall into this trap of kind of having a best friend in your church, of like somebody who you're like closer with than everybody else. Yeah. And one thing that I learned from my grandpa, who was very faithful in his ministry, is like, hey, you don't want to have a best friend in your church. Like, you can have people that like you're really close with, but you always still want to make sure that, hey, when I talk about some of these things, that needs to be calling up a person who has no knowledge of the situation, who has no knowledge of who we're talking about.
They don't have skin in the game.
Yep. Yeah. And just laying it all out there. And there's so much freedom in that too. So that's what I would say is like, if somebody is in a small town, they might be looking at their senior pastor or leadership, or you might just be doing that regardless of where you are. But there is value in having somebody who's outside of that ministry context to be able to speak into that. And even personally too, like, there are some personal struggles that, of course we want to be transparent and above reproach. And let's list all the qualifiers, but like even personally too, sometimes it's just freeing to be able to have somebody else to talk to where you're like, hey, this person is not somebody I answer to. This person is not somebody who is, in the local church context with me. It's somebody that I trust, that I respect, that I can call up who is outside, who can give me an outside perspective. So I think if you're looking for a mentor, keep that in mind, that it's always great to have somebody who is outside of your ministry context to be able to have conversations with.
Well, so I want to just highlight. We have tons of friends that are involved with your national network for youth ministries.
Yep.
And they have a website. As soon as you go to, it's literally youthworkers.net. And so in other words, if you fall in that category, you're like, I don't really have anybody to talk to outside of my current context, or whatever, that I can kind of vent or process things with, or go in there and find, like, chances are there's one near you.
Yep.
And chances are, if there's not one near you, you can join one that meets online, or like that, that you can zoom in or whatever. But as soon as you go to youthworkers.net, there's literally a big button that says search for a network near you. and then you can type in your zip code or your state, and literally it'll populate.
They should make this easier, man.
Yeah. Like literally there's nothing else you can click on.
One button.
Well, actually, I guess there's a navigation bar, but it's not even like that clear up there. Like, it's just one big blue button. It says search for a network near you.
Yeah.
And join a network. I remember, and of course I'm going to butcher this because I don't have the exact stat, but I was like shocked when I heard there was a stat. It was like youth leaders that aren't part of a network, like, fail more frequently. Like they're like a rotating door in the industries. And so like they stay, I think it was like, the way that it was worded, it was like, youth pastors that are connected to a network stay 76% more, longer in ministry than others. So it's definitely, there's some science behind it as far as just, not going out alone.
Yeah. Well, and so a couple questions for you, especially somebody who's been in the, the youth ministry.
Just call me old. Just call me old.
Stop it. This is like a personal attack you're taking every single episode. Okay. Two things. Number one, we've seen more, hesitancy to work and partner across denominations, across churches. And I think we all kind of understand why, right? It's because with the rise in like online platforms and all that stuff, it's like we can find things that before we probably would have never even talked about, but now we see a news article or we see somebody post something and now we do that. So one, I'd love for you to two-parter kind of here. One, how to kind of navigate that process. Like what are some do's and don'ts in terms of, hey, this is something that mentor could still, you might see this differently, but that could still be a valuable mentorship versus these are the absolutes. That's part one.
You mean like partnering with someone that
Like somebody
maybe different from a different like spiritual
a different denomination, a different things like that. Like kind of saying like we don't have to see every single thing the exact same way. But what should we not compromise on, obviously? And then part two, how do you, because this kind of goes with that, how to kind of go about that in a way to make sure that your your senior leadership doesn't feel threatened by that or anything like that. And I don't know how often that happens, but I know that can sometimes be if I'm constantly sharing, hey, I was talking with my mentor and he said this, or my mentor and he said that. How do you make sure that you kind of navigate that line if your senior leadership is kind of like, well, who is talking to you and how are they doing this? Like, maybe tackle those two parts.
That might be like, if they're really like, who are you talking to and what are you, like, that might be a sign of unhealth in my mind. Like that's like a yellow flag.
That's kind of what I wanted you to kind of speak on a little bit.
If they're like really protective of like who you talk to,
yes,
like it's like, hey, there's got to be a level of trust there. I'm not like just going to gossip about our problems at our church or whatever. But like at the same time, if they're like, who are you talking to? Like, do we, like who are they? Can I go talk to them? Like,
yes,
that might be a little bit evasive.
Or if they feel like they need to vet the mentor for you or something like that, that might be a sign that there's maybe a lack of trust there.
I don't know if it's not like they have a monopoly on like who you can talk to. Hopefully not. That'd be kind of odd. But obviously you want to be more protective over that than anybody that is your boss, or like you want to be making sure that like who you get advice from is like someone that you can actually trust. And that you would vet. But as far as like who to do that, like I would say obviously believers. So
good start.
You have like the tier 3, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 doctrines. So like tier 1 is like salvific issues. Like obviously if they're outside that, they're not followers of Christ. Tier 2, I would still recommend having like someone that's like a tier, like agrees on like tier 2 doctrines. Like that would maybe be within your denomination. Someone that would, agree or understand like your church structure and leadership. Like, because if you get beyond that, like, so I mean, like if I talk to someone that's Presbyterian, they have a different like church structure, government structure than our church. Mm-hmm. And that might be like, I mean, like they just might not be able to help in the same ways that someone that has like a certain background or whatever. I would say someone who's like tier 1, tier 2 agreement, and then tier 3, like to get very specific, it's like, okay, this is what would divide us as congregations, like within our churches. Like you can differ on differing doctrines, or whatever. But I would say someone who has that same approach for what would divide you as like a denomination, would be helpful. Just to have the same perspective. But again, going back to your question of if your leadership is concerned that you're talking to other people, like for advice or to get help, like that would be a concerning to me, I think. I agree. I think sometimes, again, as somebody who was young in youth ministry and didn't really know, I didn't know what I didn't know. I was kind of like, I mean, my leadership has always been supportive of that. But I was always like, is it okay? Like, does anybody care? Well, like, here's what I've learned too is, I mean, there's, one, I think our own pride can get in the way of getting help. Yeah. So I think when you said like, we're like, people are more hesitant to, to work with other people in ministry. I think that has a lot to do with our pride. Like we don't feel like we need help. Or I kind of get it from the perspective of like, so if this is like, I guess a different category, not like mentorship, but like working with other nonprofits or anything like that, like in youth ministry. The way that I kind of see it is like, man, I have enough problems of my own to solve. Why am I going to help your organization solve their problems too? Like, it's like, so if like a minister came to me and it's like, hey, we need to have this many, like, we need volunteers to help with this, or whatever. It's like, I have enough like problems to solve with my own like ministry that I'm responsible, and like, why am I going to help you solve your problem? So that's why, we have a different approach with cutting edge ministries where I'm like, we're helping youth leaders solve their problems.
Yes. Yeah.
and through that, like training students and, and reaching more. And so, so that's where like, I do not hesitate to like invest in other youth leaders, because it's like, we're in this together. Like and if there's anything that I can do to help, then like, I want to be, be helpful. Yeah. But let's go back into, how to like approach, youth leader, a mentor, how do you know if you need one? Like some people might be like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
Like, how do you know, like, what are maybe some signs that someone listening to this right now might not be aware of? Like, cause you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
But what are some things that like might be symptoms of not having a healthy mentor relationship that you could be really missing out on?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is accountability, like having somebody you're accountable to. And so if you don't have somebody regularly asking questions like, how are you doing? And I remember you asked me one question and it stuck with me, and I was just so dumbfounded when you asked the question. I was like, you said, I think it was like our first or second like official like meeting, and you're like, so tomorrow morning I open up the newspaper and your mugshot's on the front. What's the title? And I was like, what? I was like, how do I answer this? Like, and the point was like, what's your vice? Like if this is going to go south, like what's going to be the vice that's going to lead to? And I'd like never thought about that. And I was like, holy cow. Like, cause I don't allow my mind to go down that. I was, I'll never be that guy. And it's like, no. What could lead me down that path? And so a red flag would be, you feel like you have a handle on everything, because the more I've been in youth ministry, the more I've realized it's like, I don't know anything. It's like, I need somebody to help speak into this because I don't have all the answers.
I remember like, so, this was kind of a privilege, but at the same time, it was very painful to go through. So one of my good friends, we went to school together, like studied youth ministry. He became youth pastor. I became youth pastor, and he ended up having an affair with a woman at his church. And one of the benefits from that, like it was an awful experience, of course, like it was just heartbreaking, but I got to ask him like what went wrong, like what was, and that was his number one. He's like, we thought we could handle the temptation on our own. Yeah. Like we thought we were fine. Yeah. Like, we literally, he's like, if I were to go back, I would have reminded myself that it's possible to fall. Yeah. And it's like, because the moment you think like, oh no, I'm good. Like I don't need help. I don't need anybody. Like our pride kind of puffs up a little bit and just says like, and then Satan's like, ha, you got it. It's like, that's exactly what I need to use to, to influence them. So so I think that's good to, have that accountability, to have some people that are, checking on you, asking hard questions. Asking how you're really doing. Like, it's like, don't give me the church answer. No. Like, how are you really doing? Like, are you barely hanging on by a thread, or, are you thriving? Like, you're just surviving. And then what are some steps that we can help to,
Yeah, I think that's what, is anybody asking you hard questions? If the answer's no, then that's a red flag. If you feel like you have a handle on everything, that's a red flag. Not that you're like, if you're doing well, then something's wrong. It's like, no. But if you feel like I kind of got it, I know kind of what I know. And then the third one would be, a red flag would be your ministry life is getting out of balance with your personal life. And so I know that we had talked about too, and it might even been that same conversation. It's like the reason why most people fail in their ministry is because their success in ministry outpaces their success in other areas of their life. Yeah. So for instance, they become this personality in the ministry world, or they're getting their success and their validation from their success in ministry, but yet their health is completely failing, or their marriage is completely failing, or their personal walk is completely failing. And now you have this out of balance where, well, the ministry is what makes me feel good about myself, so I'm going to develop an unhealthy attachment there. And so somebody who can look at all aspects of your life, not just ministry. So that's a value to having somebody who you do respect in multiple areas, to kind of look at your walk and kind of be like, okay, yeah, man, like you're crushing it with, ministry, and like it seems like your marriage is great, and man, you just sound like an awesome parent, but like, hey, your health is not doing great. Like, hey, what are you going to do to address that? Or, hey, I'm not going to pry, but like, how are you guys doing financially? Because, hey, you need to be wise financially in order to play the long game. So just somebody who can kind of look at all aspects of that and really ask those questions.
Well, I think like, do you give the authority to anyone else to call you out on things? I think that would reveal, that would be like a warning sign. It's like if people don't have the authority in your life to actually call you out on something that might be questionable. Yeah. Holy moly, that's big, like that's like a big sign. It's like you need someone, in the ends of your life that can tell you like, hey, you're overspending, or like you need to go work out, or like eat healthier. And I was reminded of this. So like we were listening to this podcast recently, and it had a quote from Robert Murray McCheyne, which is like a famous, I think it was Scottish preacher. Yeah. So I didn't realize he was part of like a mega church back then it was like 1,000 people, which was like unheard of, like at the age of 23. And he ended up like dying by 30 because he just like wore himself out. And at the end of his life, it was like a really sobering quote. He said, "The Lord gave me a message and a horse to send me, like, to tell people about the message, and I killed the horse." I was like, holy moly. I was like, what are like imagery, like, where it's like, hey, if you're not taking care of yourself health wise, like you can't last in ministry. Like you're going to, so yeah, that was like a sobering reminder to me just recently too. But yeah, anyways, all that to say, like we need mentors to invest in us so that they're just a little bit further ahead of us and just can help us through, navigate those times. But do you have someone that's older than you that you can share things with and you're not afraid to, and so I think that's challenging as youth leaders because we're kind of sandwiched between the people that we serve and our senior leadership because we don't want to be completely transparent with our senior leadership, especially if we're wrestling with some of the decisions that they've made or, like that. And so we often feel isolated as youth leaders. And so, band with another group of network youth pastors that you can trust and go from there. But yeah, if you need some mentoring, we're here for you. So join our online mastermind, youth ministry mastermind, which the link is in the description. If you haven't joined it, like you can ask questions. No senior pastors allowed in there. So, so you can ask questions and I don't think it'll get back to them.
Yep. Sounds good.
Cool. Well, that concludes another episode of Beyond the Youth Room podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. If you haven't subscribed on YouTube, please do so. A lot of our viewers that watch these have not yet subscribed. So please do that if that is one of you. And we'll see you next time on Beyond the Youth Room.